Today I'm going to be talking about my library's experiences with and perspectives on frame-based live web interactive online tutorials, specifically Guide on the Side from the University of Arizona and Springshare's LibWizard. And if you have a device and browser handy, I would appreciate knowing whether you know. How do I project the screen that I'm working from? Thank you. Okay, so if you have a device and browser to hand, I would appreciate knowing whether you're familiar with these things. Are you familiar with frame-based live web tutorials, such as Guide on the Side and Springshare's LibWizard? So please go to menti.com, it's M-E-N-T-I, menti.com, and enter the code 342381. I'd really like to know whether you're using them, maybe you know about them, maybe you've heard something, or is this new? While you're doing that, I'll tell you a bit more about myself. At the University of Vermont, I'm our instructional design librarian, and I have lead responsibility for our online tutorials. I'm the front-end administrator of our platforms. I'm the tutorial designer for some programs. I assist my colleagues when they're designing their tutorials, and I'm the first responder when things go wrong. So some of you are using them. I'd certainly be interested to chat with you later today. And for most of you, this is going to be something new. Okay, well, thank you for playing. You can continue to submit those answers. I'm going to switch over to my slides. And the title of my presentation is Apples to Apples, because it's about comparisons. It's about a problem that we found where we were looking at two platforms with small technical differences that we think have far-reaching implications for learning, instruction, and assessment. And it's a good problem to have. It's definitely a positive problem. But nonetheless, it gave us some things to think about. So let's define frame-based live web tutorials. Since 2013, the University of Vermont has been using Guide on the Side, an open source product provided by the University of Arizona. It's available as a set of PHP files for installation on your local server. And this is the learner view of a Guide on the Side tutorial. On the left-hand side, there's a tutorial frame where directions and information can be presented, tasks can be assigned. It's also where the learner inputs their responses to questions. And on the right-hand side, there's a larger frame for live web content where the student can interact with the web, follow directions, complete tasks, find answers. So for example, a student might be prompted to navigate to a library database, run a certain search query, and then answer a question that requires them to reflect on the information that they're seeing. There are several advantages to this model of tutorial. It gives the learner a lot of autonomy over the steps that they take and how they interact with web content. It's an authentic experience. It's not captured like it is in a screencast. And the autonomy and the authenticity of that experience we know fit well with best practices for effective online learning. The content that is available through this model is almost web scale, but almost. I'll come back to that. And there's also an advantage for the librarian or the tutorial author in that they don't need to recreate the tutorial every time a website changes or a label changes or the search box moves from the left to the right. There are a couple of frustrations though. This is what Google looks like in a guide on the side tutorial. There are some websites, including some that normally we would want to use in our library's tutorials, that configure the X-frame options to prevent embedding in third-party websites. This is Google. It affects the other Google sites like Google Scholar, Google Patents. It affects the New York Times, Flickr, Twitter. So some sites that normally we would want to use and have students engage with in some of our tutorials. But overall, we've been a fairly satisfied user of Guide on the Side since 2013 for three reasons mainly. And in reverse order, one is that it's free. It's free to download and install. It's open source, so it's free like kittens, but it's a kitten that requires fairly minimal maintenance, maybe just a nice warm place to sleep. It's highly scalable. The University of Vermont highest use tutorials may be taken by up to 2,500 students every year, and it handles that quantity very well. And number one, what's most important for the University of Vermont is that Guide on the Side has some features that make it really well suited to formative learning. This is the access point for a suite of 5 tutorials that we have as part of our writing and information literacy program for first-year students. And our priority is that each student completes these tutorials in order to reach a common baseline of knowledge and understanding about information literacy concepts and basic research methods. It's less of a priority for us to know what the student knows as they come into the tutorials. The importance for us is that they get to the required point. And then here's the problem, or the dramatic tension in this, is that earlier this year in spring 2016, LibWizard was launched onto the market by Springshare. And at first glance, it's a highly similar tutorial model. You have the left side tutorial frame, you have the right side live web frame, the quizzing features are very similar, and this gave us the opportunity to examine these two products and consider which was most compatible with our local needs. And the way we went about this was that we composed a rubric for a comparative evaluation. We considered what were our priorities based on our writing and information literacy program. We consulted with our lead tutorial users, and we consulted the literature on online learning. We put it all together, and we came up with this rubric, divided into 4 categories that specifying different characteristics that we would want to see in our ideal tutorial platform. The 4 areas were formative learning, summative assessment, data management, and ease of use. And we assigned each characteristic a level of priority, essential, important, or optional. And this is one page in the rubric that shows some examples of the characteristics that we were looking for. And we tried to be careful to specify the characteristics rather than features, because we wanted to be as solution neutral as possible. And here's my pitch for investing the time in doing a formal evaluation like this. We saw several returns on the process. One was that we defined and articulated our needs and priorities in a way that we hadn't needed to when we were only working with one possible product. We were able to then evaluate each product against our local needs Of course, there's the comparative dimension. Doing this for 2 products enabled us to see what were the areas in which one platform outperformed another, and what was the significance of that advantage. Another benefit was that it gave us a tool to evaluate future upgrades and products that might come down the pike. Given the educational and financial or commercial value of data on student performance, I think we can expect more development in this area. Springshare in particular rolls out update after update. There was one last Friday, so I had to rework the presentation a bit to catch up. And then lastly, it's a tool that's enabled us to communicate very effectively with the vendors. We've been able to provide contextual detail about why we want this feature, why we want this enhancement. And Springshare's developers in particular have been very receptive to that. This is my data viz, my very crude data viz, for the key findings from our evaluation. And I'll make 2 caveats about the results as I'm about to share them with you. One is that doing an evaluation like this was trying to jump on a speeding train. Because updates do come out, we had to keep in mind that this is an evaluation of how the 2 products were in late spring, early summer 2016. The other thing is that it speaks to our priorities and our circumstances, and of course every library's mileage will vary. And I'd be very interested to know how you might see your priorities and how they might be different to UVM's. So the first area is formative learning. Both platforms have some features that support formative learning. They both give the learner control over the pacing at which they complete the tutorial. They both give the learner the option to repeat sections. But Guide on the Side does have some additional features that we consider very important. In particular, custom feedback. Here you can see on the left the Guide on the Side question editor, and on the right the LibWizard question editor. In the Guide on the Side question editor, you can give affirmative feedback to correct answers. In LibWizard, you don't get that affirmative feedback, which creates a slightly disorienting experience, I think. If you move through the tutorial and you're getting the answers right, you're not given any acknowledgement of that. If you've done the GRE, you know what that's like. You just keep going and you have no idea how you're doing. In Guide on the Side also, it's possible to compose custom feedback for different incorrect answers. So you can provide feedback that's really dialed in to the error that's being made and make a very specific prompt to the learner about how they need to rethink what they're engaging with to get to the right answer. Another aspect of formative learning that we think is well supported in Guide on the Side is that it calculates the overall performance of the learner based on the last answer that they submit to each question. So that tells us whether the student got to the point that they needed to. LibWizard calculates the learner's the first submitted responses, which is, as I said, for UVM, not the priority, given that it's this formative experience that we're looking for. The second area was summative assessment, because sometimes we do need that summative aspect. Sometimes we do need to get the student's results in order to see how is the tutorial doing? Is it working as it was designed to do? Maybe in some cases it's possible to do more than that and gain some insights into student performance. And for that, the calculation of that first submitted response works well. But I'm still going to ding LibWizard because I would like to have the option to configure the tutorial to either. I would like to have that control. The next area is data management. Unfortunately, I see data management as an area that's a major shortcoming for Guide on the Side. Guide on the Side doesn't aggregate data. What it does is when a student completes a tutorial, it routes an email certificate to the student. It can also be routed to the librarian, the course instructor, the TA, whoever it might need to be. This is what data management looks like in Guide on the Side. Just hundreds, thousands of emails. And there's not much that you can do with that. At UVM, we've done a little bit of assessment, but it's been limited to small-scale sample analysis, courtesy of our two very hard-working and not very complaining student workers. LibWizard can do a lot more. It can aggregate data on correct answers, incorrect answers, open responses, timestamps, browser choices. It can aggregate all this data, and it also has good basic features for data analysis and cross-tabbing. The one hesitation I have about data management in LibWizard is that any data that is gathered is visible not just to the tutorial owner, but also to the library's Springshare admins and Springshare. And I think that has implications for confidentiality, and it has implications for what kind of data it might be appropriate to collect within LibWizard. The fourth area is ease of use, which I'll divide into ease of administration and ease of authoring. For administration, both programs require fairly minimal back-end maintenance, limited to some basic settings and styling. Springshare does have a good advantage in that it's really well supported. It's supported by the Springshare support desk, which is really responsive. It's supported by Springshare reps. It's supported by online documentation, online training, and a whole website, the Springshare Lounge, dedicated to discussion threads. Guide on the Side has a Google Hangout. On the question of authoring, we found comparing Guide on the Side and LibWizard directly quite challenging because they have very different models for composing a tutorial. This is the Guide on the Side editor. As you can see, it's a simple WYSIWYG interface with just 11 features, and there's no code view, which may seem limited to some. I find it works well for librarians who are less tech savvy and just happier working with a word processing style interface. This is the LibWizard tutorial view. LibWizard has this highly segmented model for creating a tutorial where you need to compose and aggregate slides. The slides are here on the right. And this is the view within a slide. Again, it's highly segmented. The author needs to select different content types, label them, position them, populate them. This is something, again, I'm very interested to know how you would see a model like this. I think my view is that it makes managing and editing, revising a tutorial more efficient, but I think it takes more time to compose a tutorial from scratch. So again, here are our apples. And to some, well, the things that we missed. I'm happy to take your suggestions for things that we missed. I know of one that we missed. It was so obvious that we didn't see it, and that's related to the open source and proprietary nature of these platforms. Guide on the Side tutorials are your libraries to keep forever. But LibWizard tutorials, while they may live online indefinitely, access to the editing side and the data within them, unless you export that data, is of course tied to your license. And then to sum up where UVM is now and the decisions that we made based on this evaluation, our local priority is this formative experience in our freshman program. And we really value the features that in Guide on the Side that support this. We would love to have the data management features in LibWizard. It would save us so much of the time that we currently spend on data management, and it would enable us to do larger and deeper assessment. But without those formative learning features, we're not ready to make a change yet. So we're continuing to use Guide on the side. We've licensed LibWizard on a pilot basis for this academic year to see how Springshare's product development pans out. And we'll see where we are in about 9 months' time. So I'd be happy to take any questions about the tutorial model or these two products, but also I'm very interested to take your comments about managing tutorials and managing tutorial platforms.
Questions? Comments? Yeah.
I apologize, it's probably not the question or comment you were looking for, but I really appreciated that menti.com mini survey at the start, because I felt a lot better that I wasn't alone not knowing much about this. So I don't know, maybe this is something we could all integrate into presentations, and maybe that's another part of making the conference more accessible to people and making people feel we're not alone.
Well, thanks. I really like Menti as a polling platform. So I like having the chance to give a shout out about it. The one thing that I would mention is that if you're considering licensing Mentimeter and going beyond the free features, is beware the Swedish sales tax. It's a Swedish product. I put in the application for the funding for a license to Mentimeter, and my head of department came back and asked why it was so much more expensive than the amount I'd asked for.
Other questions or comments? Yeah.
Hi, this is a question that actually came up on Twitter, but I think it's good to repeat. Have you looked at the accessibility of these tools at all? And are they accessible? Are there issues?
I think that's another thing that we missed. At the time that we were doing the evaluation, it was on my radar to request VPATs from Springshare and connect with the University of Arizona on that issue. That's something that we need to address, yes.
Others? Did I see somebody else along here? Oh, you were pointing. Okay.
Hey, Graham, could you talk a little bit more about how the tool is integrated into information literacy, how you work with other reference staff to get them, and what kind of success you've had with the tool with students? And are you able to speak to that, or?
A little bit. We adopted the guide on site principally, as I said, to support the number of students who are taking these freshman classes. We needed a way to flip a lot of the instruction to those students, and that has worked really well. Reaching this common baseline that I've talked about has enabled us to bring the students in for their one-shot session with that foundation, and that moves the students along in their learning so that when they come into the class, our reference librarians can work with them not on those beginning points, but on the questions that they have coming up and the challenges that they're experiencing as they're beginning a major research project. So that's been really beneficial for the information literacy program. The tutorials have been used by reference librarians individually as well in their own classes, and we've got good feedback from faculty and from students. I think the area that we would like to be doing better in is uptake amongst our reference librarians. I think that it's the pedagogical implementation of tutorials that we need to support.
We've got time for one more. Well, thank you very much, Graham.
Thank you.
This has been very, very interesting to me.